Successfully communicating starts with considering your reader. And to connect with a particular reader, you may need to adapt your style. When you're communicating to your client, the stakes are high. It can be stressful, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. As long as you don't let the stress rattle you too much. It takes time and care and thought to strike an appropriate tone, to convey that you are focused on your client's specific needs, to be direct and easily understood. It may be a struggle to get it right, but when you do, the benefits are enormous. Let the stress fuel you. Don't let it stop you in your tracks. Consider all your client communications formal. Even if you feel you know the client well, even if you've attended social events with the client, you should always convey technical information in a formal manner. Keep in mind that this information will become part of the client's records and could possibly be read by lawyers, auditors, or other financial professionals. It could even be used in future years as evidence to why a certain position was taken. The most difficult part of communication with the client is to assess the client's level of tax sophistication. This is particularly difficult when dealing with a new client or new personnel at the client. They don't necessarily walk into a room advertising their tax experience. The goal is to make sure the client clearly understands the information and action items you're trying to relay, whether they have a deep experience with tax issues or whether their expertise lies in other areas. For this reason, communication with a tax director will often be very different from communications with a controller or CFO. How you determine the client's level of tax knowledge will vary, but be sure to consider the question. The answer will help you frame issues you communicate with the right level of tax technical information. Some clients with more tax experience will prefer to see the detailed primary authoritative citations you use to support your analysis and conclusions. Generally, most clients do not want or need too many detailed citations. In these cases, limit your citations, but do cite the most relevant authorities to maintain a sense of thoroughness and credibility. The format of your client communication can vary. You can compose a letter, an executive summary with a detailed report, or one comprehensive report of detailed findings. Generally, if you're responding to a client question, you will do so with a letter, assuming there are one or two relatively straightforward issues that do not require a lot of detail to explain. If you find the letter is more than 3 pages...
Excuse me, I have a tax letter for you. Sign here and I'll give you the other 6 boxes.
You might want to think about another format. One alternative to a letter is an executive summary, no more than 2 pages, with a more detailed report attached. The executive summary should clearly outline the facts, issue or issues, conclusion, and action items in a condensed and succinct manner. Generally, an executive summary is written in complete sentences, but it can be appropriate to use bullet points or lists to give the client a broad perspective on the issues. The report attached to the executive summary would then include more details and analysis. Most reports will not be as technically sophisticated as a research memo, though in some cases it may be appropriate to prepare a comprehensive report of the issue. Remember to consider your reader. The attached report should reflect the client's level of tax knowledge. Often this type of report is sent to the client for use by lawyers or auditors and may become part of the documentation for another transaction or engagement. In this case, the report is a technical document that thoroughly cites all primary authorities analyzed and is written in technical terms. Every client communication should clearly and predominantly state the limitations on what it contains. Clarity is important to protect you, your firm, and the client. The statements you make shouldn't be applied beyond their intended scope, any more than one medication can be taken by any body to cure any ailment. Pharmaceutical companies are very careful about stating the limitations of their product. You need to be just as careful about stating the limitations on yours.
This analogy is for illustration only. This man has no medical experience. Side effects of taking this analogy too literally may include confusion and disorientation. Consult a manager or partner to see what degree of clarity is right for you.
Though you probably won't do it in the same way. Where limitations are stated in a client letter is a matter of preference. Sometimes it's up front, and sometimes at the end. So, what limitations do you need to articulate? First, the advice should always be limited to the facts as stated. After recapping the facts, indicate that the advice is limited to those facts. Next, indicate that the advice is according to the tax law in effect on a certain date. If the tax law changes, then the tax professional should not bear any legal responsibility for the new law. Finally, the letter should state that the tax professional uses judgment to resolve unclear issues in the tax law. Adverse outcomes of an audit are not the responsibility of the professional if that professional used due diligence and care. The limitations section may be expanded to outline the client and preparer responsibilities in the case of penalties. Let's take a look at a real-world example. Megan McManager has just drafted a client letter. She's done her homework and understands the issues, but this letter is not ready to send. She states limitations, but not completely enough, particularly in reference to judgment and penalties. This statement of limitations is much better. The facts she stated are correct, but she needs to provide more detail. She needs to provide more specific numbers and show how they will be used to calculate the tax implications. This is much better. Here's her conclusion. It's correct, but at a minimum, it needs to reference a general code section or ruling to provide some framework. She also doesn't clearly connect the depreciation and the resulting gain. She probably assumes her reader will infer this, but she shouldn't. She needs to spell out the link between the facts and the conclusions more clearly. And here's where she needs to consider her reader. Does this client eat tax issues for dinner, or are they more of a light breakfast? If her reader is less familiar with tax, Megan will keep her guidance on the regulations general. The connection between the facts and the conclusion will be simple and straightforward, and she will write in layman's terms. If her reader is more familiar with tax, she'll probably cite more authorities and include more detail. Regardless of her reader, Megan needs to be complete in her statement of limitations and her discussion of the facts. What will vary from client to client is the amount of detail in the analysis and the number of citations. By taking the time to rework and enhance her first draft of the client letter, Megan can improve client satisfaction, reduce risk for all parties concerned, build her own credibility, and sharpen writing skills that she can then apply to pursuing virtually any project she chooses. With that in mind, we'll close by highlighting a few writing rules of thumb important to client communications. Be organized. It's your job to make it as easy as possible for the client to understand conclusions and action items indicated by your research, even when the issues at play are complex. Invest time in editing the document. Asking clients to read unnecessarily difficult or convoluted documents will often result in confusion instead of a conclusion. By investing your time, you can save theirs. That's a service that adds tremendous value. Use proper English and correct grammar. If you're careless about your communications, the client may assume you're careless about everything. And in all things, be professional. Do not use slang, abbreviations, or informal language. The client is paying substantial fees for this research. Your document should reflect your own professional expertise and the expertise of your firm. And that's why embracing the stress of creating client communications is so important. Brands are built one interaction at a time. Every time you deliver a quality communication to your client, you are building your personal brand and the brand of the firm you represent.
Wrap it up.